The first time I heard the sound, I thought it was wind, just a low, steady hiss weaving through the pines. But as we stood there, packs heavy on our backs and sweat drying on our shirts, we realised it wasn't the wind at all. It was water, rushing water, hidden somewhere in the thick Virginia backcountry where no trail markers dared to go. We'd been hiking since dawn, following what started as a faint game trail and then dissolved into nothing but underbrush and instinct. My buddy Aaron had sworn there was something worth finding past that ridge. A sound of thunder he'd heard 2 summers before while fishing the creek below. He'd never found the source, and for some reason that stuck with him. So, when he called one Friday night and said, "Let's go find it," I didn't hesitate. The forest there was wild and old, a place where moss covered boulders like forgotten graves and light filtered through the canopy in silver shafts. We moved slow, careful of footing and snakes, our boots sinking into the soft loam. The air smelled of cedar and wet leaves, and somewhere far off, that hush of water grew louder with each cautious step. By the time we reached the edge of the ravine, the sound had turned into a roar. I felt it before I saw it. That deep vibration in the chest that comes from standing near something truly powerful. We pushed through a wall of mountain laurel, branches snapping back against our arms, and then we saw it. A waterfall. Not a tall one, but wide and graceful, spilling in 2 silver curtains over a shelf of black rock into a pool so clear you could see every pebble on the bottom. Mist hung in the air like breath on a cold morning. The sun caught it just right, throwing little rainbows across the mossy stones. Aaron stood frozen beside me, his face caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. "No way," he whispered. "This isn't on any map." I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that comes when you don't have words. We dropped our packs, boots thudding onto damp earth, and waded straight into the water, boots and all. It was shockingly cold, the kind that made your heart jump, but it felt like a baptism into something secret. For a long while, we didn't talk, just sat on the rocks, letting the spray hit our faces, listening to the endless rush. There was something sacred about it. Untouched, unknown, unclaimed. And as the sun slid lower, Aaron said quietly, "We don't tell anyone about this." I looked at him, thinking he was half joking, but he wasn't. He had that serious glint in his eye, the one he got when fishing some quiet hole he didn't want ruined by crowds. "If we tell people," he said, "they'll come. They'll leave trash, build fires, this place will change." So we agreed. The hidden waterfall, that's what we started calling it, would stay ours and the forest's. No photos, no coordinates, no stories told over beers back home. We hiked out by starlight, following the echo of the falls until it faded into the dark. I remember turning once, just before the ridge cut off the sound entirely, and thinking that some places aren't meant to be found twice. It was early summer the next year when I found myself thinking about that waterfall again. I was sitting on the porch one humid evening, watching the fireflies blink in the tree line, and I swear I could almost hear that same rushing sound in my memory. The cold spray, the echo off the rocks, that hush that settled between us like a secret pact. Aaron and I hadn't spoken much since winter, work, distance, and the usual excuses had gotten in the way. But that night, out of nowhere, I called him. "Still think about that place?" I asked. He laughed softly through the phone. "Every week." Then after a pause, "You thinking what I'm thinking?" 2 days later, we met at the same trailhead. It was early morning, fog still hanging low over the hollows, and dew glistened on the ferns. The old logging road we'd followed last time was nearly swallowed by spring growth. Even so, every twist and turn felt familiar, like the forest had been waiting for us. We packed lighter this time, knowing the route by instinct more than map. The air buzzed with cicadas and the smell of pine pitch. I could tell Aaron was in one of his quiet moods. He hiked ahead, steady and focused, while I lingered behind, taking in the forest's slow rhythm. There was something about being off-trail that made the world feel bigger. No footprints but ours, no signs but the ones written by nature itself. When we crested the ridge and the roar reached our ears again, I felt the same shiver I'd felt that first day. But when we broke through the laurel thicket, something was different. The pool was still there, the falls still spilling in that twin curtain of silver, but the air felt heavier. The spray caught the sunlight, scattering it like glass dust, yet the place seemed quieter, almost wary. Aaron dropped his pack and walked straight to the edge. "Looks the same," he said, though his voice didn't sound convinced. I noticed a broken branch wedged in the rocks below the falls and a faint imprint on the sand where someone or something had been sitting. My chest tightened. "You think somebody found it?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he knelt down, touched the damp earth and frowned. "Could be animals," he said finally. "Could be." But later, when we sat eating jerky by the pool, he said, "We keep this to ourselves. No GPS, no notes, nothing." I nodded, though a small part of me wondered if the world ever truly let something this beautiful stay hidden. When dusk came, the fireflies blinked across the clearing like tiny lanterns. Aaron stared into the falls, eyes lost in the shimmer. "Some things," he said softly, "are better left alone. They stay pure that way." The next morning, when I woke, his sleeping bag was empty. His pack was gone. The only thing left was a single boot print in the wet moss near the water's edge, already filling with mist. I called for him at first, quietly, then louder, expecting his voice to echo back from somewhere up the slope. But only the falls answered, their constant roar swallowing everything else. His sleeping pad was still warm, meaning he hadn't been gone long, maybe half an hour. I figured he'd gone to scout around or refill water, though something about the stillness made my stomach twist. I waited, tending the small fire we'd built from driftwood, but as the morning deepened and the light filtered through the trees, unease began to set in. The forest felt different without him. Every bird call seemed too far away, every rustle behind the ferns a bit too deliberate. I hiked a slow circle around the clearing, calling his name, following faint impressions in the moss that vanished into the rocks. The ground near the waterfall was slick, and when I crouched close, I saw it. A narrow path, almost invisible, leading behind the falling water itself. Heart thudding, I climbed along the wet stone, gripping roots for balance until the curtain of water broke over me. Behind it was a narrow chamber, a space carved into the cliff, dark and echoing. The sound was deafening, the air cool and damp like a cave. I cupped my hands around my mouth and shouted his name again. My voice came back distorted, swallowed by the noise. Nothing. But then I saw it. His pack, resting on a flat rock in the shadows. Next to it, a small tin mug, half filled with water, and carved into the rock face above, rough, fresh scratches, like someone had been tracing lines with a knife. I stepped closer and realized they formed a single shape, a spiral. Simple, but deliberate. I don't know why, but that stopped me cold. It wasn't something Aaron would do. He was careful with the land, never carved, never marked, never left a trace. I reached for the pack, hesitated, then noticed footprints leading deeper into the darkness. Bare footprints. That's when something shifted in the air. Not a breeze exactly, but a pulse of cold. The waterfall outside flickered in the light, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw a shadow move along the inner wall. I called again, but the sound caught in my throat. When I finally backed out from behind the falls, blinking into the sunlight, I felt disoriented, like I'd come out somewhere else entirely. The forest looked the same, but quieter, heavier somehow. His sleeping bag, the fire, our tracks, all there, but his voice, his laughter, the steady rhythm of his boots, gone. I waited until dusk before finally making my way back toward the ridge. Every few minutes, I'd stop and listen, half expecting him to call out. He never did. By the time I reached the old logging road, the sky had turned purple and gold. I looked back once, through the darkening trees, toward where the waterfall lay hidden. The mist had thickened over the ravine, glowing faintly in the fading light, as if the forest itself was closing around it again, reclaiming what belonged to it. And deep down, I knew Aaron wasn't coming out that night. Maybe not ever. I didn't sleep that night. I made camp halfway down the ridge, close enough to still hear the faint murmur of the falls below, but far enough that the sound came soft and ghost-like through the trees. The fire crackled low, barely touching the chill that crept through the forest after dark. Every pop of sap in the wood made me lift my head, listening. For a long time, I thought I heard footsteps circling in the brush, slow, deliberate, never close enough to see. At dawn, fog had rolled in thick as milk. I packed up what I could carry and started back toward the ravine. I told myself I was going to find him, that maybe he'd hurt himself or gotten turned around, but as I descended, the silence pressed down, heavier than before. No birds, no squirrels. Even the stream that fed the falls sounded subdued, like it was running deeper underground. When I reached the clearing, everything looked untouched. The ashes of our old fire damp and scattered, his sleeping bag still there, though it seemed older somehow, stiff with dew. The waterfall thundered steady, endless. I called again, my voice cracking in the cool morning air, and it bounced back hollow against the rock walls. Then I noticed something new. The spiral symbol, the one I'd seen carved behind the falls, was now etched faintly into the bark of a nearby oak. Fresh cuts, shallow, but unmistakable. Beneath it lay a small pile of smooth stones, arranged deliberately. I don't know why, but I felt an overwhelming need to kneel and touch them. They were cold, slick with mist. "Where are you, Aaron?" I whispered. For a moment I thought I heard movement. A single splash from behind the falls. I hurried closer, climbed back over the wet rocks, and ducked beneath the curtain again. The chamber looked the same, dark, narrow, slick. But his pack was gone. The mug, the spiral, even the footprints had faded, washed smooth by the spray. Only the faintest scent of wood smoke lingered, like a memory that didn't belong there. I stood in that cold mist for what felt like hours, trying to listen for something beyond the roar. Some clue that would make sense of it all. Nothing came. Eventually, I stepped back out into the sunlight, blinking hard. By the time I made it to the trailhead, the day was half gone. I sat on the hood of my truck, boots muddy, shirt damp, staring at the green line of trees where he'd vanished. I thought about calling, search, and rescue. But what could I tell them? That my friend had walked into a waterfall and disappeared behind a wall of stone? That he'd left symbols on trees like breadcrumbs only nature could read? I stayed there until sunset, then finally drove home, in silence. That night, I dreamed of the falls. Not as they were, but larger, wilder, like something alive. In the dream, Aaron was standing behind them, smiling faintly, his hand raised, as if beckoning me closer. But when I tried to move, the sound of rushing water grew so loud it drowned everything else. When I woke, the sheets were damp with sweat, and the echo of the falls was still in my ears, and though I told myself I'd never go back, deep down I knew I would. It was nearly autumn when I finally returned. I told no one where I was going, not my co-workers, not my sister who kept asking about Aaron. I just packed light, left before dawn, and drove north until the pavement turned to gravel, then dirt, then silence. The forest was already shifting toward gold, that early whisper of the season curling through the leaves. The air felt heavier that day, like the woods were holding their breath. I found the old logging road again, though it looked different, narrower, swallowed by saplings and moss. The ridge trail was still there, but faint, as if trying to disappear. I followed it, without thinking, my boots remembering every route, every bend, until the sound of the waterfall came alive once more, echoing up the hollow. When I broke through the last of the mountain laurel, my heart stopped. The clearing was gone. Not overgrown, not destroyed, simply gone. The ground sloped down into a thicket of ferns where the pool had been and the air was still. No rushing water, no mist, just silence, as though the earth had folded the place away. I stood there for a long time, listening, refusing to believe it. I even climbed down, pushing through the underbrush, searching for any trace of the rock shelf, the twin curtains of falling water, the faint spiral carved in stone. But there was nothing. The creek that had fed the falls now ran dry, its bed cracked and empty, and yet, in the silence, I thought I heard something faint. Not water, but a hum, deep and steady, coming from beneath my boots. Like the heartbeat of the ground itself. I knelt, pressed my palm against the earth, and for a fleeting moment I felt it, cool, pulsing, alive. Then the wind shifted, and I caught the faintest scent of cedar smoke. Just one breath, gone as soon as it came, but with it came a sound, distant yet unmistakable. Aaron's laugh carried through the trees, soft, easy, just as I remembered. I wanted to call back, but something inside me said not to, so I just stood there, hands trembling slightly, staring into the trees. The forest seemed to move around me, not threatening, not cruel, just alive in a way I couldn't understand. And for the first time since that summer, I realized maybe he hadn't been lost. Maybe he'd simply found something none of us were meant to find twice. When I finally turned back, dusk was settling in, painting the woods in amber and blue. The wind carried a low hiss, like the echo of distant water, and I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known before. Some secrets, I thought, aren't meant to be shared. Some places stay hidden because they belong to the wild, not to us. Back at the truck, I looked once more toward the ridge. The last light was fading over it, and for a second I saw a glimmer, like sunlight flashing off water deep in the trees. Then it was gone. I never told anyone what happened, never went back again, but every so often, when the wind moves through the woods just right, I hear that familiar roar, far off and fading, and I know the hidden waterfall is still there, somewhere beyond the maps, beyond the reach of memory, guarding its secret and keeping one friend forever part of its song.